Any money that you get, you've earned. Again, we live in capitalism and in dire economic times, right? Like, companies are trying to save money everywhere they can. But, like, you need to have the conversation.
This is The Anonymous Marketer, a podcast where we tackle the biggest questions from the B2B marketing community. But instead of bringing on guests for a quick chat, every question comes from an anonymous source. These are the questions B2B marketers have, but are afraid to ask. Let's start the conversation.
Welcome to another episode of The Anonymous Marketer, a podcast where we tackle the biggest questions from the B2B marketing community. Joining me today is Ashley Louise, co-founder and CEO of Ladies Get Paid. And we are going to unpack how you can do exactly that, even if you are not a lady. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today. It is so great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, it's great. I know you have a lot going on today, so super duper appreciate it even more after our chat before we started recording. But anyway, as I mentioned earlier, Ashley is the co-founder and CEO of a brilliant organization called Ladies Get Paid, where they have made it their mission to champion women in their professional and financial lives. Ashley's contributions to women's equality in the workplace have been recognized by a little place called the White House, which is a big deal, I would imagine. And she has been featured in publications like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Good Morning America. Before Ladies Get Paid, she worked in business development and platform partnership. She worked in business development and platform partnership at IAC and Vimeo, where she closed partnerships with companies like Apple, Google, and Microsoft. Actually, and I'm sure you can tell I completely ripped that off from your amazing and very comprehensive LinkedIn profile.
No, but
It's
I've been
so
working
good.
on my LinkedIn profile, so I'm glad it is sufficient.
No, it's fantastic. Seriously, if anybody listening to the show needs a LinkedIn profile glow up, go and use Ashley's as a template.
Copy
I
me.
will send all of her links in the show notes, but it's
You
really
can
good.
copy me as long as
really
you
good.
follow me, because those are my personal KPIs.
Fair trade, absolutely. Okay, so before we get into everything, and it probably goes without saying, but while Ashley specializes in women's equality in the workplace, the advice here is going to be applicable no matter what gender you identify with. It's due to the nature of the show and the way that our listeners submit their questions. I have no idea who submitted this, so it could be a lady or a man or someone who identifies as neither. But I definitely do, actually, if that's okay with you, I do want to take a little meander into the unique challenges women face in terms of pay inequality, because I would be remiss if I had you captive in my virtual studio without chatting to you about that. So,
My favorite topic.
yeah, excited to get into all of it. I would imagine so. Alrighty, so a refresher on where the heck we get the questions from that we discuss on the show. So the clue is in the name. The show is called The Anonymous Marketer because we take questions from marketers without revealing their identities. So in order to submit a question for the show, you can go to marketersindemand.com/anonymous and you'll see a form where you can submit your most pressing challenges or problems and have leading industry experts like Ashley help you solve them. So without further ado, here is this week's question. A couple of months back, our company laid off a huge chunk of people, many of them on the marketing team. We went from being a team of 10 to 4 people, and I've had to pick up a huge amount of slack. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy to have survived the layoffs, and it's been a period of career growth for me, figuring out some new marketing areas. It's been tough, but I know I'm doing a great job. However, either my job description have changed, and I feel like I'm no longer being paid what I'm worth. I don't want to lose my job, but I really feel like I need a raise. It's now a bad time, just a few months after a layoff. This person comes from a tech consulting company with 11 to 50 employees and a marketing team of 2 to 5. So a lot to unpack there, Ashley. I would imagine this is not a unique situation. This is probably something you're seeing quite a lot of in your community at the moment.
It's something everyone is seeing at the moment, right? Even just this year, 21,000 people have been laid off at Meta alone, right? Like there's been lots of, like hundreds of thousands of people have been laid off recently. And it has a lot of times, look, the biggest feeling should go for the people who got laid off. But I don't think a lot of
100%.
people have consideration for the people who do remain also. And a lot of teams,
Yeah.
I don't think about making a plan for what happens when you do lay off a bunch of people for the people who are still left, right? Like,
Yeah.
it definitely changes your workplace in a lot of ways. One, some kind of weird survivor's guilt. Two,
Yes.
people obviously feeling a little cagey about the health of the company. And then three, right, this kind of workload thing that we're talking about, in that the company is not expected to do less work, right? So it's people picking up all of the other work. So here's the thing I would say in general. It's never a bad or wrong time to have a conversation with your manager about how much you are paid, right? I'm not saying you're going to get it every time, but it's never a bad time to have the conversation. And we suggest you are regularly talking to your manager about both your pay and your career progress at the company. You know, some of the best advice I ever got was from a friend, Ariel Patrick. She's the chief communications officer for Ariel Investments. You should kind of be asking for a promotion and a raise year round, right? Like, managing up is one of the best things that you can do for your career, right? You're the person driving your career. If you are not pushing that and managing it, you can't count on someone else to do that for you, right? So yes, your manager should be active in your career plan, but you do also need to tell them what you want your career plan to be. So for me, I think in this scenario, right, like, if you're already kind of regularly talking to your manager about your career progress, doing regular check-ins, how am I doing? Am I on track? Setting goals, right? This conversation is not going to come out of nowhere. But if that isn't a practice that you've already had, you should start doing it now. And I think it's fair to just have a conversation with your manager, right? Like, this is stuff they need to know also, because I'd imagine if you're having this conversation, the rest of the company probably is also having that conversation.
All the men at the company are probably having this conversation.
I'm sure they are. And I'm sure
I had
they
a conversation with my husband about this the other day, and we were just kind of discussing like pay inequalities. I'm already going off on down a little task, and he works in IT, and a lot of the people he works with men, and they are regularly kind of advocating for themselves and asking for, even when a lot of the time they, might not, their performance might not indicate that they deserve it or they're at that level. But as a woman, that's not something I've worked in female dominated industries for most of my career. And having these upfront conversations is just not something that we do. Even the stuff that you're saying to me now, I'm just like, oh, I already feel uncomfortable. Just thinking about having these discussions.
But so this is what I say when people talk about feeling uncomfortable and not wanting to do it. It's almost like, how much are you willing to pay to avoid being uncomfortable? Right? Because by having the conversation, do you end up with a $20,000 raise? And was that brief period of discomfort, is that an okay price to pay to get more money?
When you frame it like that, it's what, like 10 minutes, maybe,
right,
of feeling uncomfortable with some prep work,
where, how much does it cost you to not? And that's kind of how you have to think about it. That's kind of my philosophy.
Money, potentially.
Well, it's not just the money in, like, you get a raise, right? Like, yes, it's the money there, but then when you get a raise, that also means you're contributing more to your 401k. If you have a 401k match, you're getting a higher match. And then over time, that compounds, right? So it's not just the money that you're getting right now. Over the course of your lifetime, like, that's a lot of money. Like, a lot of money that you're missing out.
Is a thing.
And the sooner you start, the more it grows, right? So, like, it's a lot of money that you are losing over your lifetime to avoid, like you said, having maybe a 10-minute uncomfortable conversation.
That is such a crazy way to frame it.
And that's my kind of like...
You've blown my mind already.
That's kind of my, like, I like to say, don't get in the way of your own bag, right? Like, you have the control of going to your manager and talking to them about how much you get paid. You also have the control, if you don't like how much you're getting paid, to start looking for new jobs. And in that process, also, like, if you know that you constantly talking about your career to your manager makes you more likely to be promoted, you should do that. You know, there's so much stuff that you can't control and you can't change in your career and your life, or getting laid off. Like, it's crazy. The things that you can control, you have to do. Otherwise, you're just leaving money on the table.
So to go back to our friend who submitted this question, sorry, I kind of diverted there.
No,
I
where were we? You should have a conversation. Whether or not you are going to get more money right now, right? Like, you also have to be aware of what just happened, right? Laid off a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. But
yeah,
just have the conversation with your manager and be like, hey, this is how this works now, right? I've taken on a lot more work and I am not making more money. And
yeah,
that's like, what can we do about that? You know, is it possible for me to get a bump now? If not, when is it possible for me to get a bump? Is it possible for me to just get a bonus at the end of the year to like catch up for the, you know, work that we've done? And one thing that we like to say works a lot is kind of, how can we get creative to find a solution here, right? You don't know what things are, like, the whole range of things that are available, right? Like, is it exactly the same as getting paid? No, but you know, hey, I'm taking on all this work for X and I'm struggling a little bit with my time management. You know, there's this class I would like to take about like more effective time management and prioritization skills. Can I expense that? You know, things like that. How can we get creative here to find ways to increase your reward? I don't know. Do you work at a company like where you could get more equity, right? Like, you don't necessarily have to have the answer to start a conversation with your manager. And it's good that they know how you feel. And that's the most important thing.
That's such a great point, because I think a lot of people kind of see these conversations as quite binary. So, you know, even if you kind of, okay, what's the worst they can say? No. But you still kind of feel like, okay, no, now I've polluted the relationship. Now I'm going to lose my job. Now I'm going to be first on the chopping block if there's another round of layoffs. But actually, I think if you just kind of, just for, you know, what you're saying through, if you go in with a conversation, you know, with that mindset rather than an ultimatum, I think that already kind of makes it easier and more comfortable for you and your manager, just having that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't suggest going in there and being like, I'm going to quit if you don't pay me more. That might work for some people.
Lined up.
Sure, yes.
Yeah.
But then you actually know that you have more money then, right? Like, that's not blowing up your own spot. And like, look, you can strongly
100%.
express how you feel, but at the end of the day, like, there's realities of how the world works in capitalism. So like, you know, but making it an ongoing conversation is the best thing that you can do, and talking to your manager about it. Just be like, hey, this is not good for me right now. This ain't working. What can we do here? Right? And it's, you know, let's check back in 3 months and then we'll be able to do something then. Yeah. But it's important. I would say the one thing that's important about that conversation is to have at least like one solid takeaway, right? It could be anything from like, yes, let's talk about your professional development budget, or, you know, let's talk about adding equity, or even let's set a date to have another conversation in why. Like, there should be one takeaway. You shouldn't leave the conversation just kind of being like, good talk. Okay. You know, like, there needs to be a follow-up there, but you know, maybe that's just then you and your manager have a check-in once a month about your like career development, not just your work. Right? But like, make sure there's a takeaway, and everything's a conversation. Like you said, it's not like a binary. It's not like I'm coming in hot.
Yeah.
I got to get it now or else that's it. You know, it's a conversation is always much better than a one and done.
And even, I think at this point, I mean, reading that question, I was like, my default reaction was like, yeah, it was probably a bad time. That in some ways, it always opens the door for this conversation and for you to kind of start having these conversations regularly. it almost kind of gives you a springboard
Mm-hmm.
on which to be a little bit more candid and just,
Because your boss
and
isn't dumb
it's
also.
worth,
No, it's like your boss isn't stupid either.
absolutely.
Like, they probably know people have feelings after a bunch of the company gets laid off. Let's say that. And you make your boss's job easier the more information you give them. Right? And like, that's another thing that will always help you at your job if you make your boss's life easier.
Even just kind of forcing the conversation about, okay, like, what are my goals? How am I meeting them? I think a lot of people, even if they kind of have like a performance review structure, oftentimes people, even a manager won't kind of have that laser focus on exactly the things that you need to be ticking off on your task list. And it almost forces that conversation. And maybe that's something they've never actually thought about. I know this sounds really obvious, but I've also worked at companies where my goals and my output is not 100% clear. And a lot of the time I've had to figure that out. And, I would have pat on my head only when I kind of asked for it. So kind of like a pat on the head every now and then.
Focusing on clarity is so important. And that's kind of what I meant by make sure you leave the conversation with a takeaway and like an action. If you need to do X, Y, Z, and we're a little veering off from the question here, but make your boss tell you, no. It's still in the same, it applies to this conversation. It applies also not to this conversation. Having your boss give you some kind of vision of you need to be doing X, Y, and Z, then you know to do X, Y, and Z, right? Like, you're not shooting in the dark then, wondering, am I doing the right thing? Like, clarity is the number one thing that I think organizations need to work on more, right? And this also goes for like, when you're looking for a job, the same thing, right? Like, a job post tells you exactly what they're looking for and what they want. So it's almost like you need to have your own job post for your own job when you're in it, right? And again, having that relationship with your manager. Tell me exactly what you expect of me. That will like make me succeed here. And this is the same thing, again, ongoing and also in the kind of vacuum of a layoff, right? My role here has changed because the composition of our company has changed. So I need you to be clear with me about what that means for my expectations. And if my expectations are increasing, then I should also expect an increase in my compensation.
What do they need to do? So they're gonna set up this conversation with their manager. What do they need to go in prepared with?
I mean, I think the best thing to do is, this is what my life looked like before the layoffs, and this is what it looks like now. And being very clear about all of the things that have been added to their plate, right? So it's like, here's a list of all the stuff I was doing. Now I'm doing all of these things plus these other things, right? And this is always advice that we give if you're asking for a raise, if you're asking for a promotion, if you're like writing your resume, quantify. Like, if there's a way for you to quantify the increase. So, let's say we're marketers, right? So like, I was managing X campaigns and now I'm managing Y campaigns. So like, I have increased the amount of stuff that I'm managing by Y%. Or let's say you're an account manager. We laid off half the team. So now instead of managing 10 accounts, I manage 25, right? Like, those are hard numbers. It's very, very difficult to argue with raw data. So any way you can put a number on something, whether it's a percentage increase, dollars, like raw numbers, that will always help your case more. So having a very clear, I did my homework, I came in here, here's what I was doing, I got paid this much. Here's what I'm doing now. Look at how much more work this is. What do we do about this? Like, that's the way to go into that. Having in your back pocket things that would benefit you that are not like a raw salary increase, it's good to have, right? But they're going to know better like what they have to offer than you. But going in there, making the case for yourself as clear as possible. And again, this is the same advice I give people asking for a promotion or asking for a raise, right? Like, Show the difference.
I love that. Especially going in with like hard numbers. I'm not like mathematically inclined as a words person. I'm a content writer. So that already feels like a bit foreign to me. But the way
But
you
it
kind of,
shouldn't.
you can make it very easy to quantify. You know what I mean? I can kind of say, okay, my output was 5 articles a month and now I am expected to do 10. You know what? So it's
Right. There you go.
doubled. And yeah,
See?
yeah.
You
exactly.
twiced your words.
I can do that.
See?
I'm learning so much, Ashley. Oh my goodness. I did want to ask this advice that you have given our questioner. How would your advice differ knowing that they're a woman? Would it stay the
It
same?
wouldn't.
No.
I mean, the only reason my advice would differ is if there's like context about,
Yeah.
look, people receive information from different people in different ways, right? And this is just the reality of life. You have to know how your boss responds to things also, you know? So this is not like a gendered advice. It's just like, it's like a sales thing where it's like, understand who you're talking to and how to make the most compelling case to them. Are there times when women, when they're talking about money, might need to soften a little bit and use we words instead of I? Maybe. But I don't think I would off the bat be like, you're a woman, so you got to do this differently. I think if anything, you're a woman, so you might have to do. No, it's more, I think, you're a woman, so the advice I might give you is you're going to have to do something you might not usually do, that men usually do.
Yeah. Yeah. This is going to make you uncomfortable, maybe.
Right.
Lean into it. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Let's talk about rewords. Sounds like rework, rewords.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about gender and language that I don't know if I have definitive right or wrongs on my opinion on, more so like thoughts about them. You know, there's been a lot of kind of evolving advice and bodies of work over the last, let's say, 10 years about women and money and like salary negotiation, which is obviously like where my deepest specialty lives, you know. But on the one hand, a lot of times we ascribe men's success because they say I instead of we, right? Like women are socialized to not brag. We're socialized to be team players, right? Where men, often they will say I did something when a whole team did that, right? So on the one hand, is one person, the thing that kind of evolves from that is you should say I, which if you did something, you should absolutely take credit for it. Like women do not take credit for their accomplishments enough, and they don't talk about them enough. Like talk about your accomplishments all the time. That being said, workplaces work better often with people who think about we and not I, right? Like, are we just describing the use of I as more effective in advocating for yourself than we because men do it and we ascribe in our minds men as successful because society versus is that actually, is it the I or is it just because it's a man saying it? And by it, I mean just talking. Not even like, you know what I mean? Like, yes, you're a man. Of course you've done things that are worth more money, you know? Like, is that it and not the actual word I here?
Yeah.
And sometimes women are not treated kindly when they use I phrases. Whether or not that's fair, again, that's another thing. And that also just kind of depends on your workplace or whatever environment that you're in. But this is kind of where the EQ comes in, where it's just like, what's the thing here that's going to get me? What's the thing that's most likely to get me to my goal? And then you figure that out. That's kind of my advice in general is this a scenario where I should use I, or is this a scenario I should use we, right? Things like that. Is this, you know, I had a boss once teach me this thing about kind of getting work done, but I think about it too in coming into like conversations. He said, is this a beer or a Red Bull moment? Right? Like a beer moment is when you need to just like take a step back and take a breather. And a Red Bull moment is when you're like knuckle down and just go for it. So like,
I love that.
you know, it's, you have to kind of treat each scenario as its own thing and then use all of the tools in your toolbox to get to your goal.
I
So
love
that's
that. I can't get over the beer versus Red Bull moment. I love a good metaphor, and that it's so poignant, and it's going to stick with me.
Yeah, like a Red Bull moment is like, I am coming in here for a salary negotiation and I'm going to ask you for a dollar amount. Where a beer scenario is probably closer to, well, we could call it a tea. We could say a tea moment instead of a beer moment.
I love a cup of tea. Yeah.
A non-alcoholic moment where it's like you're coming in for a conversation and saying like, I understand the context of what's happening here. Half the company just got laid off. Can we find a solution? You know, like those are two different things there. And they each work for different scenarios.
I really like what you pinpointed there about kind of having all of the context and kind of putting your EQ cap on. And I mean, you know, you're a marketer. The number one first step advice for basically any piece of a marketing puzzle is know your audience, know who you're talking to. And I think that is so, so applicable here.
Yeah. I mean, look, the conversation is going to be a lot different if half the company just got laid off versus let's say you like work for a publicly traded company and you just posted record-breaking quarterly results. Those are two different conversations about your compensation.
And again, as we said right at the outset, there's not a bad time to kind of, and it's not even like you're going in for your Red Bull moment where I'm going in, I'm giving an ultimatum or I'm, you know, negotiating hard for this specific amount. There's never a bad moment for that cup of tea moment where you're just kind of opening that dialogue. And so maybe it's worthwhile, not even for our asker, it's worthwhile kind of looking at it as, okay, you're going to go in and have the one single conversation. It's you're going to start a series of conversations.
Mm-hmm. And which vibe is right for which moment in time. The time is always right to have a conversation. It's just what kind of conversation are you having?
I love that. Okay, amazing. You've given me so much to think about. I wanna go down all of these rabbit holes with you. Maybe if anybody has any more questions for Ashley, so the market is in demand /anonymous link, or you could just, you know what? Okay. You could find Ashley on all of her socials. We're going to put all of her links in the show notes and the ladies
hit me in
website.
the DM.
Yes. But before you tell everyone where specifically where they can find you, Ashley, is there anything else you want to add, you want to say to the person who asked this question?
Have the conversation.
Asking for a raise after a layoff.
10,000% have the conversation. You should, again, be self-aware of the context in which you are having this conversation, but you have to have the conversation. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm going to say bosses just don't hand out free money. Any money that you get, you've earned. Like, that's not, but again, we live in capitalism and in dire economic times, right? Like, companies are trying to save money everywhere they can. But, like, you need to have the conversation.
And also, question asker, it sounds like you're very good value for money because you're doing 3 or 4 people's jobs by the sounds of things. So you're a lot more affordable than your old team. And if you're doing them well, you should definitely have a raise.
I mean, look, you can say, how much money have we saved by laying off all those people? Can I maybe get a slice?
You want some numbers?
Just a little slice.
Yeah. On that note, Ashley, thank you so much for this conversation. You've given me so much food for thought, and I just many things I need to look into. Where can people find you? Where can people find this amazing work that you're doing? If they want to be part of your community, where do they go?
ladiesgetpaid.com/subscribe. Join our email list, and you can get some hot tips from me and Claire every week. And then, you know, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm Ashley Louise. I'm Ashley L. Louise on Twitter. Ladies Get Paid is our handle everywhere. Come on in and join the fun. You will make more money if you follow our advice.
I mean, I can't argue with that. I'm in. I'm joining the community as soon as we get off this.
I can't believe you're not in already.
I need to do it.
Hit that like
Yeah,
button.
okay.
See, we're in.
Homework. Like and subscribe.
Everyone listening to this, schedule a conversation with your boss to have regular check-ins. Do it.
Just a conversation. Do it.
Do it.
Love that. Tell us how it goes.
Yes, please.
Okay. Ashley, thank you so much. If anyone wants to find Ashley, look in the show notes. And if you have a question, please go to marketersindemand.com/anonymous. Send it to us there. And I will find someone brilliant like Ashley, or maybe even Ashley again, who knows, to answer it for you and give you a solution. So yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for checking out this episode of The Anonymous Marketer. This show is part of Marketers in Demand, a network of podcasts featuring the world's leading B2B marketers. Unlock your full potential as a B2B marketer by going to marketersindemand.com.